Hey, Monica, did you know it's now even easier to listen to Round the Hay Bale podcast?
What? Really? How easy?
That's right. All you have to do is say, Alexa, play Round the Hay Bale podcast.
Playing Round the Hay Bale from Apple Podcasts.
Ooh, we fancy. Tune in to Round the Hay Bale every Monday at 9 a.m. Central.
Round the Hay Bale is brought to you by...
With gardening season at an end, Cayce certified organic products are still what your soil needs.
From overwintering fruit trees to preparing your soil for spring, Cayce's calcium-based fertilizer gives the essential minerals they need to thrive.
Applying Cayce to agricultural soils and water has been proven to increase plant and crop yields while making vegetables and grains healthier and more nutritious.
In addition, Cayce can help restore the nutrient balance in animals when they are fed plants grown using Cayce in both soil and water.
To check out all of Cayce's organic products, visit cayce.com and use the promo code HAYBALE for 10% off your purchase.
Grab a cup of joe and gather round the hay bale with your hosts, Alicia from Country Mama Musings, Cayce from Ormsby Farms, Lisa from Yogi Hollow Farm, and Monica from Bland's Promised Land Ranch. Now, here they are. Hey, y'all. Hey.
Hello, and welcome to Round the Hay Bale. I'm Alicia.
I'm Cayce.
I'm Lisa.
And I'm Monica.
On today's episode, we are talking hiccups on the homestead. What do you do when things go wrong on the homestead?
We also have a collab video on our YouTube channel between the four of us dealing with grid down situations.
But before we get into the discussion, we want to thank our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by Cayce.
Well, a huge thank you again to Cayce, our sponsor. They are amazing, and I know we all love to Cayce the crap out of stuff around here. I know Lisa really loves it. Okay, so today we were talking about hiccups on the homestead, and so I wanted to start by talking about what a hiccup is. I mean, what do you think a hiccup on the homestead is? And I think for us, it's really something that interrupts our plans. I mean, I know at least here on the ranch, on Bland's Promised Land Ranch, Eric is a planner. And he is notorious for making lists. And I have talked about it on previous episodes where he has a lovely chalkboard in our kitchen. And he likes to add to that chalkboard weekly and create lists of things for us to do. But one of the things that inevitably happens here on the homestead, as I'm sure it happens to many people, whether you're running a homestead or not, there are hiccups in his plans and our plans in general. They interrupt. One such interruption or hiccup that we had recently here was that we were enjoying a lovely Tuesday night. Eric got home from work. You know, he works outside of the home all day. We were hanging out. It was a Tuesday evening. We had eaten dinner with the kids. It was a great night. I had heard some noises out in the pasture earlier in the day, and our plans for that evening were just to water the garden, hang out with the kids. We were going to maybe play a game. It was just a lovely, quiet evening on the homestead. And Eric went out to go check on a couple of the cattle that I told him were kind of out there making noises, because I figured, well, their tummies are rumbling and they're hungry, so they're going to be loud. He came in about 7:15, and he said, "Hey, Monica, just so you know, you did hear cattle out there today." And I said, yeah, I heard somebody making some mess. And we were sitting at the table still, the rest of the family. And lo and behold, he said, well, you did hear a couple girls out there bawling. It was Libby, which is one of our young girls. She's about 2 years old, and she's a brand new mama. And he said, it was her, and her calf is dead. And my heart just dropped. I was like, wait, what are you talking about? No, that's not even possible. I literally just saw her baby, like, I don't know, 2 days ago. They were in the front. She was hanging out with all the other little babies. And immediately it was like our night had been turned upside down. You know, he works all day long. He wants to come home. We want to get a couple small things done and hang out. And that was a huge interruption to our evening. And on top of that, we haven't had rain in such a long time that for him to start digging a hole in the ground, because the thing is that not only do you have an animal that's now deceased, it was 115 degrees here the day before that, the day she actually had died. And she died somewhere over the night into the evening. And that afternoon itself, it was about 110 degrees. And so now we have this extremely injured, bloated calf that was only about 10 weeks old. And she was stuck. She was actually stuck in our trailer wheel well. And so not only did we have to get her unstuck, we had to now dig a hole in this dirt pasture that needed a lot of help. We had to have the whole family pitch in, and we were out there for several hours, and it was just awful. And, you know, I couldn't even cry about it or be upset about it. I was really upset, and I couldn't even cry. I didn't even shed a tear until I realized it, till it hit me, and I had to tell my mother-in-law about it. But I mean, talk about a hiccup. I mean, we were set to just play some games, hang out like a family. We had all of our chores done early. It was going to be a chill night because we had been busy the weekend before, and it was going to be just a chill Tuesday. And boom, something happens. It's inevitable. Something always happens. But instead of flipping out and losing my cool, I was like, okay, we got to get this taken care of. We got to get this done before dark. What do we need to do? And so I think that that's where we are really kind of looking at today, is talking about hiccups on the homestead and how do you deal with them? How do you deal with them? Do you give up and run away and say, never mind, forget it, I quit? Or do you just say, okay, we need to push through and let's figure out how to resolve this issue? So anybody else have an idea of a hiccup on the homestead, something or a way that you would deal with it? Cayce, what do you think?
I was just going to say, as you were talking about Eric and his lists, we all know Eric, so we all know that he is a list maker, and I too am a list maker. And you can plan for everything on the homestead except that one thing that may just skip your mind. Again, we're all human. Y'all were planning for a quiet night, and boom, the one thing that y'all did not expect to happen happens. With us here on our homestead, I have planned for everything from tornado to hurricane to fire to grid down situations. But one thing that I have not planned for was not having a working stove during canning season, which seems so simple. And you think, well, Cayce, that's not really a hiccup. It really is when you're thinking of the amount of produce that a homestead or a farm brings into the home. And I've had to kind of calm myself down and not panic or throw tomatoes at walls or throw peppers at walls or at my family. But think of how I'm going to preserve these food without having a working stove. So it's good that we're talking about hiccups tonight, because there's a wide array of hiccups, quote unquote, that we're going to be talking about, from death to animals to grid down to electricity not going to your stove, or to electricity not going to the whole homestead. So I just wanted to throw that in there, that our chat tonight is going to be over an array of hiccups. But I'm going to pass it on now to the grid down queen, Alicia, who really, you put the collab together to do dinners and stuff for completely off grid, which if you have not checked it out, go to Country Mama Musing. She has a really delicious potato and meatball, you wouldn't call it a stir fry. It's just kind of like a bake, right, Alicia? That you did in the sun oven.
That I did in the sun oven, yeah. And it's grid down. I put the down in grid down, baby. It's one of those things where if there's anything about branching out into this homestead life, and if you're not anticipating the hiccups, I think we need to, come up with a hashtag and put it on a tee, buckle up, Mary, because things can get a little bumpy. It's just like both of you have expressed, and I know Lisa will chime in here in a moment, but you have to expect the unexpected. It's the only, regardless of lists. I tell you what, I know we've got our list for our topic here tonight, and somebody's going to forget something, or we're going to interject something else into it, because it is a constantly changing, growing, morphing thing. And that's what your homestead, it is constantly morphing and changing. Regardless of your best laid plans, something always throws a wrench in the deal and there's a hiccup. And you have to be flexible like a willow tree so that you can get past those times. We've had times where we've had no electricity here. We've had times where we've had no water here. We've had times where we've been in a snowstorm where we don't even see another human being for over 8 days. So all of those are hiccups in our day-to-day life, and we have our lists and our plans too, but we know that in an instant they can go out the window. And so I know that you and I and everybody here on our podcast here, we were talking one day about one thing going wrong after another thing going wrong, and how we had to change and be flexible and rethink our plans. And it's not that we were complaining, but we commiserate with each other, because if one of us doesn't have an answer, the other does. And so we are able to help each other get through those hiccups. And the more we were talking about it, we're like, we need to do a podcast on this, because all of us are experiencing these little hiccups, whether it is weather, lack of feed for our animals, lack of electricity, lack of an appliance for putting together our canning for the season, an unfortunate, unexpected death. And who would have thought of a little cow, a little calf getting stuck in a wheel well of a trailer? It's just those random things that you just, nobody would expect that. And that is a huge hiccup. Monica, I'm sorry for the loss of that baby. I know that must have been heartbreaking. They're just hiccups, like we're saying it. And it's so important to work together and try to come up with ways to help each other through these times, because it can be discouraging. It can be where sometimes you feel like throwing in the towel, but that's not what this lifestyle is about. Lisa?
Yeah, I think that the inevitable is inevitable. That's just the reality. You can plan all you want. You can research all you want. You can do everything, and things are going to turn out differently. So, you know, a lot of people know that recently I've had 2 pigs farrow. And so that's where my examples come from, you know, and one of the examples is, you know, I prepared for everything knowing that I don't have a vet out here. I made sure I had a stellar first aid kit, stellar birthing kit, which, by the way, I was quite thankful to have, because it made life so beautiful, because I just brought it right down to the barn both times. And when Eleanor farrowed, I had everything I needed, except there was an issue post-birth, right? Postpartum, that gave me some concern and required me to get some antibiotics. So the one thing I didn't have on hand was antibiotics as a preventative to keep an infection from rearing its ugly head later on. And the same thing with Fiona. You know, Fiona had some struggles that Monica and I talked about. One of which was, all the textbooks will tell you how often they deliver. And don't get me wrong, I'm not naive. I know that, you know, each animal is different. However, Fiona went 3 hours, which every book will tell you is a major issue. And, you know, you have to make decisions where, are you looking for a stuck piglet? Are you going in there and going to make it worse by putting a finger through, you know, the inside of a pig in their uterus? So, you know, those are the things you have to make these decisions on. And they're not decisions that always need to be split second. Sometimes they are, to prevent further injury. But other times you have to just sit there in all the chaos and just say, this is, what do I need to do? What do I need to do? Stop and think, pros and cons, you know, and trying to figure things through. But I definitely am a firm believer in it. If you think you can control things on your homestead, good luck, because the majority of it is out of your control. And the other point that it makes me think of, Monica, is hay, right? If you're not baling your own hay and you're having to get hay, like I am, and I know Monica does as well, having to get hay from an outside resource is very challenging, especially in drought years.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that's been that's definitely been our mind lately with the hay, because we do rely on other people for that. And even though we had people secured from previous years, all of our people that we depend on each year could only offer us just a small amount. So we just immediately decided, okay, we have to pray and start looking elsewhere. But I think the thing that really defines how you're going to respond to these hiccups and all these different situations that come up is, there's two things really. If you can either look at it and say, okay, I am going to just, this is not for me. I love this point of it. I've been through these hiccups, but now this animal isn't for me. Or you're going to look at it and say, or this thing, this part of it isn't for me. Or you're going to, and you're just going to realize the hiccups are too much for you and move on. Or you're going to embrace it and go forward and say, you know what, this is just life. I'm going to push through this and I'm going to enjoy this animal or this season or this garden or whatever it is. If you stop doing something because you realize that this just isn't your cup of tea versus quitting it because you just give up because you're working out of fear, there's two different things there. We recently had lambs that we acquired and they're gone now. Eric sold the lambs while I was gone, y'all. He totally sold the lambs out from under me. So sad. I didn't even say goodbye. But I will say that next door neighbors, they were raising sheep, and the woman that was there, she really hadn't been doing it for a while. She had recently moved in a few years ago, and so the sheep thing was new to her. And even though her significant other, he'd been doing it for a while, he was like, I love this. I do this because this is a second source of income. It's great. They do their own thing. Well, within the past 6 months, she had 2 mamas have issues. And she was like, because she's new to this, she was like, this is not my thing. I cannot do this. I'm done. Now, she chose to get out of that business. She chose to get out of the, raising the sheep portion because for her, it wasn't her cup of tea. She decided she couldn't deal with all this loss. She couldn't deal with all these things that were going wrong. And she went that direction. And I think for her, that was the best decision because she wasn't operating out of the immediate fear. Because originally when it first happened, she was like, that's it, sell everything, I'm done. And I think when you operate from there, you'll live in a season of regret later to not know whether you really tried. And then after it happened a second time, she realized, okay, I'm not cut out for this. This is not my jam. Like, I think that's important to look at that too and really take time to think, is this your jam? Because if it's not, you'll know.
And I think you brought up a really good point, and I'll tell you why. So, Ryan's been with animals, different varied, species that, we're breeding and farrowing and birthing and whatever you want to call it for the different animals, calving. When Eleanor, which was my first farrowing, and like I said, I did a lot of research. When Eleanor, everybody shows the baby to the mama, and it's such a beautiful sight, right? You've all seen those videos, right? Yeah. Eleanor tried to eat her baby.
Yeah.
Like
that's how
Eleanor lunged at it, like, let me eat the baby, right? Anytime the babies went near her face, she shoved them across the barn, or should I say flung them across the barn. And she's a first time mama. Yeah. And so here I am on the phone with my mentor going, oh my gosh, she's trying to eat the baby, and I'm like,
advice.
and I said, I've got all the piglets in the tote. I'm going to just hang on to them for a little while longer. But you know what? I'm really excited that I got through that because Eleanor has been an incredible mama. Eleanor was tired. She was also a first time mama. When you put a piglet in front of her, she went, what in the heck is that? And so if you operate from that emotional side, you miss out on opportunities to learn and opportunities to grow that help make you comfortable in what you're doing. Had I jumped in there and been like, oh, I got to save him, which is usually my gut reaction. And I was really proud of myself. I was like, no, okay, we're going to put you in the tote. You can see mama later. And that was it. Give Eleanor the break. And sure enough, Eleanor had a last piglet and she let them nurse and they were fine. So it's just, you miss out on opportunities though. I think that's the thing. And Monica's trying to say, don't come from that emotional, irrational place You have to come from a place of knowledge and understanding and really thinking about it from a rational standpoint.
I think
Yeah.
also,
Go ahead, Casey. I'm sorry.
well, I was just going to say that that is a perfect way to put it, Lisa. And also not getting the emotional side of jumping into stuff too quick as well will help that whole situation out. If you have been listening to our podcast for the two seasons that we've been on the air, I was the one for a while that was like, oh, I'm going to have this and this and this and this. And luckily I had fabulous co-hosts that were like, okay, Mr. Cayce, settle down, and let's try this first. And I'm glad I did, because when hiccups happen, I don't have 4 billion things that could turn into 4 billion hiccups to where I give up on everything all at once. Like, as Lisa was saying before, hiccups are inevitable to happen. How did you put it? The inevitable is inevitable?
Yeah, the inevitable is inevitable.
And if you go into homesteading understanding that, then I think a lot of it will seem a lot more smoother. By the time this comes out, a lot of the followers know that I took a good solid week off. No social media, nothing, because I was at a breaking point of losing my mind, like battling serious depression in my head of why did I even get into this lifestyle? Have I made a terrible mistake? Have I done all of this just because I saw it on Instagram? And that was a huge hiccup for our farm, because during that week, I didn't care about the garden. I didn't care about remodeling the house. I just wanted to be alone. And if I wasn't planning for or if I would have planned, I would have never planned for that situation, I guess is what I'm trying to say, because nobody thinks they're going to lose their coconuts halfway into the first year. But if I can portray anything from that whole situation, is having good homesteading buddies that you can bounce ideas off of and learn from, and not necessarily just learn stuff, but truly listen and learn. You can be a homesteader of 30 years. You still can learn something, whether it's from somebody that's done it 6 months, 6 years, 60 years. There's always that one thing that you can learn. And I promise one last story before I hog up this whole hour-long episode. But again, most of y'all know that Monica and her kids came to visit me on the homestead. And her second oldest runs their pig show at their ranch. Even though I'm old enough to be his father, he has a lot more experience and knowledge about pigs and gave me fabulous advice. And if I could recommend that to older people, that even though you were old enough, and they're shaking their heads, but really I am old enough to be his dad. No, seriously, to listen to people that have the knowledge. He gave me some fabulous ideas on how to get my pig station set up so that when I go and see Lisa and the piglets, I have knowledge on what I need before I go and get piglets. So listening and learning is a huge thing to slightly avoid certain hiccups. Not all hiccups, but certain ones. Listening and learning. So now I'm going to volley it to somebody else and get off of the soapbox.
You know, what you just said there, Cayce, made me think. We're discussing hiccups, and when we were little kids, what were we told to do to get rid of the hiccups? You hold your breath. Stop what you're doing, hold your breath as long as you can, and the hiccups will go away. So when you have the hiccups on your homestead, regardless of whether you're on 10 acres or a quarter of an acre, you can call it a homestead. You know what you're doing to become more self-sufficient. I know that's been a topic of discussion lately, but when you're putting all that together, stop, take a second, hold your breath, take a look at that hiccup until it goes away. But what Lisa was saying earlier before you shared your story with us, Cayce, was we were talking earlier about how we all make lists and we're pretty regimented people, and we're talking about being flexible. in that flexibility, and one way to really help you navigate the hiccups, I really believe, is having your list, but not just one list. You have to have your plan B, your plan C, your plan D. You have to have all of that ready, because when that hiccup happens, you have to have the plan in your mind ready to go. Even if it's completely unexpected, you've got something put in place that you can glean from to help you navigate that. And I think it's so important. So for instance, when we lose power here, it's happened to us several times throughout the last 8 or 9 years we've lived here on this farm. We've learned what we have to have in place. When there's something that happens, we've learned where to turn, what to do, where to go turn off the water down in the basement, how to live without the electricity for a while. If we're snowed in, we've got everything in place. So when those hiccups happen, they're not as devastating, because we've tried to think of the scenarios. And like Monica's experience, sometimes there's scenarios you just can't plan for, but you've got at least some roadway paths that have been cleared so that your thinking could be a little clearer to help you navigate and get where you need to be during those times. I hope that makes sense.
I think that it makes sense too. I was listening to what you're saying, and it made me help me remember that sometimes when you have a plan, you can plan for everything, but you can't plan really for nothing. And we try to try to be prepared for the unpreparable things. You know, you always try to think, oh, the disasters or whatever, but you always have to have a plan B, like you said, and that's plan B is a great idea. And for us with this poor little calf, she was going to be one of our replacement heifers. We liked the way she looked at only 10 weeks old. We knew she came from an amazing bloodline. She was set to be a replacement heifer because both her grandmother and her grandmother and her aunt were going to basically be gone. She's from a bloodline that we're going to cycle out this next calving season. And I'm looking at it going, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? But see, God's prepared a way for us already. Like he already has other girls. This entire calving season, we only had heifers born to us. So we normally sell all of our boys right away, and we only have usually a heifer or two, and we make a decision who we want to keep. Well, this year we had extra heifer calves to pick from. And see, it was cool because as all this was happening later on in the evening, I looked at Eric and I was like, we were going to keep her. We were going to keep her. What are we going to do now? And I had to take a breath, like you said, and think, God's already made a plan B for us. We already have two other gorgeous heifer calves on the ground. They're still from a good bloodline, and we can keep one of them if we so choose. And we have options. And if you have options, you can just pivot a little bit and see that there are other things. And again, if you take time to hold your breath, don't black out, but hold your breath, think for a second, and then realize that, you know, there are options, and you can find ways out. And it's not just about that. We see, like, I feel like there's a lot of death in a homestead when you're running animals, because we do raise animals a lot, and we have a lot of different animals. And I feel like that's been one of our biggest hiccups here on the homestead. You know, we have a bunch of rabbits and we plan, and then all of a sudden Abigail comes in and she's like, Mom, one of my moms, one of my babies, one of my does, she can't walk. And I'm like, wait, what? This is, it's 10 o'clock in the morning. We can't be having this. And those are the hiccups. Those are the things that happen here. And we just have to take a stop and take a moment and think, okay, we'll figure this out. We'll figure this out together. And thankfully we try to do that together here. We always, when we have to take a breath and realize what we're doing, no one ever has to make a decision alone around here. And we are a big family. And I realize there are a lot of you that are alone, but you don't have to be alone. There are so many people in this community that you can work with. And, you know, Cayce may be hanging out at the homestead there for, you know, a while off and on. He's back and forth by himself, but he's got everybody here. He's got all of us that he can say, okay, some stuff went down today and I need some help. I need to pivot, and I need to bounce a couple ideas off you guys because I don't know what to do. And that's the best part about this community too, is find people that you can, you know, work with.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think the other thing too is sometimes people don't think of, I'm trying to think of the right way to say it. People often don't think about preparedness or prevention as a means of dealing with a potential hiccup. And what I mean by that is we have a well. Water is a challenging resource in a lot of the Western states, Midwest states. particularly in South Dakota. And so whenever I post that we are hauling water in the summertime, because we go through large amounts of it, people always say, well, why are you hauling water? You have a well. Like, I couldn't imagine not, doing that. And we're trying to preserve our well because we're blessed to have a well that is functioning. And if it goes, we may not have one. So we're simply trying to preserve it and lessen the burden. And that'll be a very expensive hiccup. And it's cheaper to just haul some water. And it actually works out better because we can't have any outdoor spigots because we'd have to blast with all the rocks. So we have a gravity fed water that goes right down to the back part of the property and makes life a lot easier, whereas we'd be dragging buckets down there. So I think that's also something to think about is, not only being prepared for natural disasters, but that prevention aspect of trying to prevent something that could really affect the homestead deeply.
And Lisa, when you mention, hauling the buckets and having your gravity fed water system, I remember when you were doing the bucket brigade. And I remember how much work it was. And there were times where you were a little discouraged because it is a lot of work, but you were dedicated to doing it. But instead of letting the hiccup of having this little roadblock of watering your animals, instead of letting that get you down, you held your breath for a minute, you thought about it, and you guys came up with a really great gravity fed system. And so now you've got that in place. And I know besides your well, I know that even though you've got that gravity fed system in place, I know you've got a plan B behind that, even because you're smart and you're prepared. Like you said, you have to be prepared and just think outside those lines. And so look how much you've learned just in the last few years. You've only been on your homestead a few years, and you're learning through these hiccups to overcome. And what a great testimony for tenacity for living on a homestead is just that example right there. Because you were hauling buckets every day, even in the winter. And I know it was difficult for you. So I applaud you for that.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. I mean, I think that here's the reality for the folks who are listening. If you don't like hiccups or you can't deal with them, you shouldn't be homesteading. Right? Because if you think that everything is going to go smoothly every day, you're in for a real shock. So just reevaluate if that's what you want to deal with, because it's reality. I mean, I'm trying to think of the right way to say it. I mean, we had a piglet that was not eating, and we noticed something was wrong while all the others were very voracious eaters, all doing their business. And I had a friend of mine say, I'm going to say, did you check its bum to keep it family friendly? And I said, no, I didn't. And they said, go check it. It didn't have a bum. So unfortunately, it had a deformity that, that occurs with pigs here and there. And so that's something we have to watch for. We do think it was an isolated thing. We don't think it's genetic because I talked to the breeder. However, if I have to keep an eye out for that, because if it keeps happening, that's not somebody I want to breed each time.
And we're sharing our experiences here. All of us have property, but we do have members in our community who don't have property and they're homesteading. We have Slava, who has joined us on our podcast before. She lives in a very suburban area, and she farms just on the side of her home. And I have a very close friend who lives down in Tennessee, and she has a very small home, but she's learning all of these homestead things. And even though she's doing a lot just on her back porch, in her kitchen, she's experiencing the hiccups. And so I'm trying to talk her through these times. It happens no matter where you're homesteading. She ended up with a bunch of gnats in her soil inside of her plants at home. She really listened and watched with everything that Lisa and I were doing with the aquaponics, hydroponics, and Cracky. And she has a really great hydroponic system that she got for free. And she's setting that up and growing. And it's like, she had a really tough time when she first started because the sun exposure was just killing the seedlings. So she's had to think, okay, there's my hiccup. It's not set up in the right place. It's a lot of work to move it, but this is what we're going to do now. And she thought about where to put it next, and it's thriving. She has an amazing aquaponics, hydroponics system set up now, but she had to get through those hiccups. And so for our listeners who are listening, when you hear us talk about being on our properties and we have an acreage, it doesn't mean you have to have an acreage. And it doesn't mean that just because you don't have an acreage, you won't have hiccups. You're going to have hiccups regardless of what you're doing, whether it's dehydrating, starting your small little garden, canning, there's always going to be a hiccup. So just prepare for that, plan for that, and don't get discouraged when they happen, because they happen to everybody.
Well, I think in one of the other podcasts I had shared how when we lived in Maryland, we actually kind of farmed out our farm, if you will. we used our family as our resources so that we could have some of these amazing homestead benefits. We lived in a townhome where there were HOA restrictions, and so we couldn't do anything outside of what they wanted. I mean, down to the color of our shutters on our home. So we were certainly not having any type of crazy plants or anything out in the backyard. We couldn't really do any kind of garden, big garden, any kind of garden really. And so we did gardening at my in-laws. And I'll never forget when my husband asked my in-laws, who are amazing, and they've always been so willing to help us. He said, yeah, Mom and Dad, I really want to use the side of your yard where it's not being used. It's just an open space. Can I use some of your yard to, grow a garden? We want to, try some green beans and maybe some broccoli and maybe grow potatoes. And he kind of listed off some stuff. And I'll never forget, his dad was like, yeah, we tried a garden before, son. It's just too sandy over there. You're not going to get a garden going. But I mean, you're more than welcome to try. Now, I think that would have been me listening to him. I would have been like, oh, we're never growing a garden. It's going to be terrible. And because that would have been the first time really having this experience. I just remember my dad always growing little tomatoes and little onions, and that was his little thing. And I just thought, man, his dad's saying we can't grow it. It's too sandy. And I would have just given up. But Eric was like, okay, well, thanks for the opinion. And we're going to try it anyway, if you don't mind. And he was like, yeah, go for it. And again, his parents were super fine about it. So we went across the Key Bridge in Maryland where we lived. And we drove like an hour away to a horse farm in Baltimore County. And we loaded up this little landscape trailer with a ton of horse manure. And we were so excited to get this horse poop all the way across the Key Bridge, all the way to our homestead, our little makeshift garden we were going to do, right? Our little garden. No joke, y'all. Our little trailer, our little landscaping trailer we had only had for maybe a couple weeks, the tire blew coming across the Key Bridge full of poop. I was like, are you serious? Sparks were flying. I'm like, oh Lord, we should have stopped. We should have not even done this. We're going to run off the road. We're going to go into the water now. All this poop is going to cover me up. It's going to be done. I mean, I was prepared for total devastation and done. Eric's like, it's not a big deal. We're going to get over the bridge. We're going to pull off. We're going to have this done. It's all about your attitude. And I was so thankful because he was like, this will be fine. Needless to say, we grew a garden and it was beautiful and it was amazing. And Eric had a plan and the plan was executed, and he did not let all the stupid little stuff that likes to get into your head that would have just broke me, because I was like already starting to break down. I was like, oh, it's going to be bad. He was like, it's fine. So it's really helpful to stay out of your own head sometimes. And now when we got to Texas, after that was about 3 years before we got to Texas. And I'll never forget, the guy across the street from us said in 2015, we were starting our first garden. I was super excited. It was a small little garden out front. And this old man come over and he said, what you doing over there? And I said, we're going to grow us a garden. We gardened in Maryland. We're going to do it here in Texas. And this was August. And they had just they were in like a heavy, heavy drought. It was a bad drought. It was the last really bad drought like we're in now. And he was like, you're not growing anything there, honey. You can't grow nothing around here. And he was super serious. And I was like, oh, we're not going to grow anything. And I turned around and looked at Eric, and he was like, please, Monica, we've been here before. What do you have to say now? And I was like, okay, yeah, you're right. You know what? We're going to grow us a garden. And we did. And life is fine. But it was one of those things where I was in my own head and I let other people get in my head. And thankfully, Eric was not having any of it. And he was like, we're going to pivot. We have a blown tire with a ton of poop in our trailer. It's going to be fine. Me, I was ready to just jump off the bridge. I was done. So, I mean, just stay out of your own head sometimes. When the hiccups come, when the stuff comes your way, when you're sitting in a trailer, sitting in a pickup truck with a trailer full of poop, it's okay. That's just it'll work out. Always pivot.
That sounds like a name of a great book
Or a bad country song.
or a bad country song. And you're right. You have to make sure that if you're willing to commit to this new type of lifestyle of becoming more self-sufficient and learning these new things and taking a chance, you can't let other people get into your head so that you get into your own head and have all of that negativity. Things are going to happen. That's what, like what Lisa said, the inevitable is inevitable and it's going to happen, but don't let it get into your head. Don't let it bring you down, and try to think of new ways. There's more than one way to skin an eggplant. I'm not going to say it the other way because I'm an animal lover, but
I was about to say, is there really? Are we sure on eggplants?
Okay, a kitty cat. So, but now Casey made me lose my train of thought, but you all know what I'm talking about. You all know what I'm talking about. There's more than one way to look at things, to approach things, to overcome things, and to be successful at things. And so that's where you just accept the little hiccups, roll with them, enjoy them, learn from them, share your experiences from them so that when one of your friends or neighbors or family members have a hiccup, you're able to help them hold their breath and get over it and regroup as well.
Because it is such a beautiful lifestyle. I mean, we've talked about all the kind of like negative hiccups that could happen, but we've talked about on other podcasts, this type of lifestyle it's so rewarding in the end. Like we just had to pull up some of our summer garden because I was super late in putting winter squash in. And as a hiccup, for those of y'all who are listening, winter squash does not mean it's supposed to be planted in the winter. I just learned that. Yay, Casey. Yay, first time gardener. But we're pulling out all the plants. And my mother was like, gosh, aren't you so proud? She said, look what you have done this first year. And you truly got to stand back. And I had to look and be like, I am so proud of myself that even though I can't can any of those tomatoes right now, I have my weight in tomatoes that I'm able to now put away in dice form, salsa form, sauce form. It is such a blessing of a lifestyle. So don't let the hiccups deter you from if you feel like you're being led, if God has led you to this lifestyle, listen, follow, just know that as Lisa said, and I'm going to put it on a t-shirt, the inevitable is inevitable. So you may want to check out, we may have merch.
And it's funny. I have a friend who reached out to me at the end of each year that we've been on YouTube. She's reached out to me and said to me, do you realize we were talking about this and you did it? Do you realize we were talking about it and you did it? Like you're accomplishing it. And so I have a video coming out. It'll be out actually by the time this airs, but someone had asked me to participate in a collab, and I'm glad somebody actually asked me this question. So I had a friend on Instagram ask me how many animals we had on 2 acres. Now they're not a close friend. They're just someone I talk to all the time. I'm glad they asked, because you say, Casey, sitting back and feeling proud. I remember when we started our YouTube channel, we had chickens, and I remembered saying, all we talk about is chickens. And this is just kind of ridiculous because all I got is chickens. I got 12 chickens. Well, this year on our 2 acres, we have had over 80 animals here this year. Now, mind you, most were poultry, game bird, meat chickens, but all of the animals combined, including the piglets, we have had over 80 animals on the farm this summer on 2 acres. So if you think hiccups are not going to happen, if you think that a chicken's not going to get bumblefoot, If you think that a pig is not going to get out and run up to you when you get home from your trip to the big city, good luck. Right? It's the reality. Somebody's going to get sick, something's going to happen. And this lifestyle is not for the faint of heart. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that people can't do this, but I will tell you, we've had a big year of losses, and losses to us, I should say, because I don't want to compare them to Monica's loss of her calf, because it really does pale in comparison to that. But when you look at the losses, you need to be ready for those. You need to be ready for those, because one minute you're joyful and excited and thrilled and happy about the future, and the next minute you've lost something from nature, a life, a business, you name it. I mean, it's huge. And it's like, this lifestyle can be a huge roller coaster. And again, I'm not trying to frighten anybody. Just be sure you want to do it, because if you really don't, you're going to find out quickly that you can't handle it. You can't handle it. And I'm going to give a case in point. Is the piglet that had the issue, I chose to beg a vet to euthanize it versus cull it on the farm. The culling should have happened here, so to speak. However, it was our first litter. And for me, I just said, I need this little guy to have peace. And it was worth it for me to not have my husband cull it, and for me to be able to bring it to a vet and then bring it home and bury it. That just worked for me this time.
And you know what? There's a lot to be said for that. You can't compare yourself to other people and what other people would do. And you can destroy your own homestead, whether it's on an apartment ledge, whether you're apartment steading, whether you're homesteading on 30 acres or 3,000 or 3, whatever it is. You can literally destroy your own homestead by comparing yourself to others all the time. And we do it all the time. You know, that is something we do so much. And you know what? I am so proud of you for doing what you needed to do with your little guy, because that's what you would have done. Because I said to Eric, yeah, you know, Lisa, you know, made sure it went to a vet. And he's like, why didn't she just cull it? And I'm like, because for her, that was her decision. Now, he didn't say it in a mean way. He was just like, what? I said, but you know, I'm not the one here on my homestead that does that. If we have an animal that's injured, an animal that's sick, that has to be put down, you better believe I'm running and get one of my big boys, or I'm calling Eric and I'm like, hey, dude, when you get home today, guess what? I got an animal that needs help, and I can't take care of it. If I can't take care of it, then it's done. But you can't compare yourself. And even if you don't, let's just say you don't have animals, you have a garden, you have herbs that you're growing that you cherish and you love because you started from them from seeds, or your little tomato plant in the little bucket, and it's on your ledge of your apartment building. And all of a sudden a stray cat comes by, knocks that thing over and destroys it. That's devastating. I'm sorry.
Yep.
And all loss is loss. So your loss is the same as my loss. Yours is greater than mine. When Alicia lost a rooster this past week, I think it was, Alicia, and I was like so sad for her. I'm like, oh, it's a rooster.
Yeah,
most people are like, it's a rooster. It's a rooster. Oh, baby, sweet babies. And that's the thing. When you lose any animal or anything that you value and you cherish on your homestead, it is hard. And that is a hard place to be. Don't compare yourself to other people. Ever, because if you do, you're going to find yourself failing before you even really get started. And then, you know, it's just important not to compare yourself.
That reminds me of one of my all-time favorite sayings. A flower does not compare itself to its neighbor. It just simply blooms.
Mm-hmm.
We all need to do on our own respective homesteads, learn from each other, support each other, grow, but just bloom. And when hiccups come, or when that breeze comes and makes that flower sway in the breeze, just go with it. Just go with it. Don't let it destroy you.
Yeah. And I just want to clarify. It's funny, Monica, because I'm glad that you brought that up about not comparing loss, but I wanted to explain something. You know what I do? I compare it from a business sense. Right. So I just wanted to clarify. That's what I meant.
Yeah.
Was I know how much a calf is worth to the ranch, right? If you look at the emotional, but then you also look at the business sense, because that's how I justify loss
Yeah.
in my head here, right? Is it's a business. So for me, one less piglet I can sell, right? But
And
the
that's what I was
emotional,
thinking. Yeah.
the emotional part of me had to make that decision, right? But the business side of me, I will say, was like one less piglet to sell.
Yeah. Well, anytime the kids aren't doing their job here, we lord that over them. We're like, oh, okay, well, you don't like to eat bacon? Well, if something happens to those piglets, that's $80 out of my pocket, son. And they're like, really? I'm like, you will pay me for the loss of this life if something you do or don't do causes this death on the farm, just so you know. And we kind of do say that. And I mean, it's not in a bad way. I don't mean lord it over them. Like we like throw them outside and make them do their chores. But our kids have responsibilities here. And it's important for us to make sure that they understand that these animals and these things depend on us. The way that my kids depend on me to feed them and to make sure we have groceries and snacks for them to dig into each day. These animals depend on us to take good care of them. And we are stewards of God's creatures and the land that God's given us. And so we try to do our very best with that. And I wanted to touch on something, and I may make some enemies here, but one of the things when you do is when people compare themselves a lot, but we're going to say it anyway. Eric's going to hate me, but one of these things that people do a lot is they, you can really appreciate what you've done. And Cayce, I think it's awesome because you made such a great point on how many things you've brought in and looking at your harvest and just being so proud of that. And there's this thing where people, they like have the harvest and then they weigh their food and then they compare it against each other and like, I weighed 85 pounds today. How many pounds did you weigh? And then they like get all excited and they're like, I weighed 115 pounds today. It's awesome. Okay. First of all, that is so amazing. And I'm going to say, if you brought in 85 pounds of produce today, you freaking rock. But what I'm not going to do is I'm not going to jump on that and be like, oh my gosh, I only weighed 30 pounds of produce today. I'm so sad about it. Because that right there can get into people's heads. And I think it's silly and nonsensical. And it's a waste of time. Now, if you're weighing your things because you are producing that food and you're weighing it so that you can sell it and you can do those things and it's for that business type thing, awesome. But in my opinion, my very loud opinion right now, I think it's silly, and I think it's a very non-helpful thing to a person to weigh out and compare how much you have produced to other people. And I think that can be a huge detriment to your mental state and to your farm if you're not doing it from the right spot. So I think it's awesome because you can see value in it. It's great. But make sure you're coming in at from the right perspective and not because I'm comparing it to, how much Alicia's brought in. Because I didn't bring in 800 bajillion quarts of cucumbers, because now I need to go, like Lisa and I be feeling all bad because we only had like 3 jars of pickles and Alicia and Cayce got like 800.
I got one.
I like
I was
pickles.
about to say, I just did $7.99. Okay. I did not do 800.
Yeah. Like I didn't make any pickles this year. Maybe like 3 jars. So yeah,
No.
Lisa and I.
But Monica, I want to say, I am right there with you on that train. For those, most everybody knows what we're talking about. I mean, we're trying to be very subtle and Miss America about this.
I don't know what you're talking about. I'm just saying people like to compare things.
Well, let me just say, I'm going to say it since I have the biggest mouth anyways. That is why I got into the state of depression that I was in, because and I'm not even going to say a newbie homesteader, because Lisa, my boo thing, is always texting me after we shoot these podcasts. And it's like, if you say that you're a newbie homesteader one more time, look at all the stuff you're doing. So I'm not going to say that anymore. But I was trying to, the complete beginning of the spring, summer garden season, I was trying to compare myself to bigger YouTube channels. The 3 co-hosts know which channel I'm talking about, that I was, for some reason, completely obsessed with and wanted to make my garden look exactly like Sarah and Kevin's from Living Traditions Homestead. And when it didn't turn out to be exactly like how theirs looks on Instagram, I'm like, well, Cayce, you suck. You can't do anything. And then I'm like, okay, well, I was talking to the podcast. I'm ready to have chickens. I'm ready to do that. And God was not ready for me to have those yet. But until I realized that, I'm like, Cayce, you suck. What? You can't even get a chicken coop ready. Like, you want to be a homesteader, and look at all these people on Instagram that have their chicken coops. Look at all these people on YouTube. You're on a podcast talking about homesteading, and you can't get your shit together for a minute to get a chicken coop together. And it sent me to a spiral.
You're
And
growing shiitake mushrooms?
I am, yes.
Well,
They're
I
so
will tell
good.
you that your black garden paper, I don't even know what it's called because that's how much I care. It looks really good. I was really proud of it. I was like, this black garden paper I'm walking on that's like plastic is super good. It's super fancy. I felt like I was like in super bougie town because I was like, oh,
You
excuse
were.
me?
You were.
I was
You know,
like,
I'm the bougie homesteader. I'm
I
the
had no
bougie.
clue. I was like, am I supposed to do this? My kids were like, Mom, your garden looks like trash compared to Mr. Casey's. I'm like, yeah, y'all, I know.
No.
I don't compare to nothing.
But see, that's what I had to do is I had to stop comparing myself to everybody else or comparing myself to a collab where you were pinned against other people to see who can grow the most. And no, I'm not salty because I wasn't asked to be in the collab. I just think after having my week off that it is hateful for us as a community to pin people against whether it's in good fun or not, because that's how people get out of homesteading or get torn down emotionally because they can't compete with their buddy on another homesteading channel that grew more this and more that. Like, we've got to stop comparing ourselves to everybody else. Just compare yourself to you.
If that's, I'm sorry, folks, I got to wrap my brain around this. First of all, Cayce, I want to say thank you for being so transparent and vulnerable because not a lot of people want to say that. So the bottom line is we're here to adjust your crown, right? Just like we would anybody else, because we're all in it to succeed. It's not about competition. It's not about let me get 50 acres of land and only use 2 acres and then throw down and say Lisa only has 2 acres. It's not about that. It's not at all. So when I say that we had over 80 animals on the farm, for me, that's a big sense of pride in the fact that we have accomplished that and raised our own meat and have not purchased from a grocery store now for almost 2 years. So, but comparing yourself to somebody, and I'm trying to be very mindful about my words, comparing yourself to somebody in an idealistic way is always going to let you down because everybody has a different setup. If I was comparing myself to some of the people that you talked about, I would be let down, right? Because number one, Cayce, you're working, you're doing the homestead, you're gardening. They're just doing that, right? That's one thing. And a lot of us are working. The other thing is if you're comparing yourself, and I've lost my train of thought, but I'm trying to catch it real quick.
Well, I was just going to say before you said that, this is nothing against Sarah and Kevin, because I did throw that name out there. I just want to put it that was the first channel that came to my mind when I was thinking about it. So nothing bad about Sarah and Kevin. They are great homesteaders. They seem to be really nice people and good Christian people. So I just wanted to say that before we got any comments down below that the hay balers are hay bale hating.
You were idolizing them. And so when you idolize somebody, you don't have a clear view, right? You also don't see all the pictures. And the reality of it is real life is not social media. On my social media,
Edit our stuff. We'll all edit. We put out there what we want people to see. And like Lisa said, you can't look at another successful channel and idolize that concept of what they've got going, but you can pull some mentorship from it and some support from it. It's a fine line though. You just, for instance, I'll throw one of my favorite channels out there is Off Grid with Doug and Stacy. I'll never live up to what they've got going on, but I know that, I accept that, and I see it as they are like a mentor to me where I can learn from them. So once I was able to do that, because there were times where I was like, oh man, I wish I could do that. And I feel bad that I can't. And then you just have to readjust a little bit and move forward. And as long as you can see it as a mentorship, I think it's a much healthier thing. And with what Monica had started about this competition, I think the name of that says it all. I think their intent was good by this competition that was started, but the name speaks for itself. That's the mentality that it ended up being. And a lot of people were damaged and hurt in that, because it's not, it's a competition. And you can say it's a friendly competition, but feelings get hurt. And Cayce, you can say that your feelings were hurt because you weren't invited, but I see it as a blessing that you weren't, because you're too good to have something like that in your life, because that would hurt you. And I don't want to see you hurt. So I'm considering it a blessing that you were not invited to that. And I consider it a huge blessing, and I'm thankful all the time. I know what you're saying. When it first came out, I was a little hurt that maybe I wasn't invited to something like that. And after I started seeing things roll out, I was like, I'm so glad I didn't get invited to that, because my heart's too tender and my emotional status is not, it doesn't roll that way. I can't have that burden on my shoulders. So I'm thankful. It's blurry, Lisa.
Well, I wanted to come off of one of the things that Lisa said, because, I think it's good to be able to sit back, like Lisa said. And I think it's good for you to be able to say, I've had this many animals on my farm. I've done this. And that's a good thing. And you should be able to say that. And looking at that too, it's one of those things that I can go, we do that every year. Eric and I will sit down and go, oh, we have 20 head of cattle now. That's amazing. We have this many more than we had before. We have, this many head of, we have this many poultry on our farm. We have this many turkeys. My goal this year was to have 12 more turkeys added to my farm so that I could have one for every month, right? That was my goal. Well, every time I would start to have babies hatch, they would die. Every time I saw a mama with babies, they would die. I'm convinced that turkeys want to die. They want to live for a hot second, and then they want to die. And so at the end of the day, I was so upset, and I was like, I'm never going to, my own personal goal, I failed myself. And then all of a sudden, at the very last moment, this mama comes from where I thought we lost her, and she comes and she shows up with babies. And I said to my 8-year-old yesterday, I said, hey, how many turkeys do we have out there? And he's counting them up. He's like, yeah, we got 12 new turkeys this year. I said, oh my gosh, we got 12 new turkeys this year? And he said, yeah, we got 12 new. And I was like, yeah, you're right. We did get 12 new turkeys this year. And it was like, I had that moment of accomplishment. And that's what's important about noting, and I think it's important that you said that, Lisa. You had 80 animals come through your homestead in that amount of time. And that's such a cool thing. So I think looking at how many jars you put up is important. I think knowing how many pounds of tomatoes, if that's the way you're going to weigh it in, is important. Just make sure you find the value in your accomplishments that way, and you don't lose sight of why you're counting it up, why you're taking that tally, and why you're looking that direction, because sometimes we can really lose that focus. And sometimes all the things can get us down. In the end, we just look and have to be thankful for what we've done and what we've accomplished, because I'm sure everyone out there is killing it.
If I only put away 1 quart of green beans, that's still 1 quart of green beans, and it's still valuable.
Exactly. 1 quart more than you had last year.
Nobody has the right to take that away from me unless I let them. So for everybody listening, regardless of what you're doing on your homestead, whether it is that herb garden in the kitchen or just a small little container garden on the balcony, a side garden, a backyard garden, or if you're on a property, don't let the hiccups get in the way. Learn how to overcome them and just learn to roll with it, and you're going to be okay. All right, so let's wrap up our conversation here. It has really been great discussing the hiccups on the homestead. We hope that you learned something and gathered a little bit of that that tenacity that you can overcome these things when they come their way. Because like Lisa said, the inevitable is inevitable. It's time to hear more now from our sponsors.
With gardening season at an end, Cayce certified organic products are still what your soil needs.
From overwintering fruit trees to preparing your soil for spring, Cayce's calcium-based fertilizer gives the essential minerals they need to thrive.
Applying Cayce to agricultural soils and water has been proven to increase plant and crop yields while making vegetables and grains healthier and more nutritious.
In addition, Cayce can help restore the nutrient balance in animals when they are fed plants grown using Cayce in both soil and water.
To check out all of Cayce's organic products, visit cayce.com and use the promo code HAYBALE for 10% off your purchase.
Y'all, thank you for stopping by the Hay Bale. To mention again, check out our off-grid collab over on our YouTube channel and be sure to follow us there for all new video posts that we put out.
Next week on the podcast, we are talking about dealing with predators on the homestead.
If you're enjoying our third season of the podcast, add us to your favorites by pressing the plus or follow button.
Rating the podcast and leaving comments helps us to grow, and we really appreciate it.
Alrighty, friends, we will see you on the next week's episode.